I'm Dan Rosenberg.
And I'm Stephany Lang.
And we'd like to welcome you to 11 Minutes with Octane 11, a B2B marketing mini podcast where we talk with experts in B2B marketing about real life challenges and solutions in this complicated space in just 11 minutes, because no one has time to listen to long form podcasts, least of all B2B marketers who are using more tools than ever and are under more pressure than ever to deliver breakthrough messaging and business impact.
This season, we're focusing on ABM reporting. Now, ABM has meant a lot of things since the phrase was first coined over a decade ago. Account-based marketing is the literal term, but to a lot of marketing teams, it's meant a completely different way of thinking about marketing. And for many, it's meant a complete overhaul of their tools and processes and a lot of hacking and building just to answer the question, is this thing working?
Is this thing working? That's the question we've been trying to answer during this season of the podcast. I just attended Zoom Info's GTM 2025 event at the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, and they shared some crazy stats. The average B2B team uses 34 go-to-market tools, so their data is super fragmented, and 82% of RevOps leaders say their fragmented data is the number one headache. So no wonder it's so hard to get a clear answer.
Today, we're excited to be speaking with a seasoned B2B marketing strategist who is not afraid to share candid insights on demand generation, paid media, and B2B measurement, and question the status quo. So without further ado, let me introduce Andy Groller, President and CEO of Dragon360. Andy, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
Amazing. Well, let's jump right in. So you've mentioned on your own podcast that industry benchmarks can be misleading. How should B2B marketers determine which metrics truly matter for their unique business models?
Oh boy, we're going right for it, huh? Yeah, I mean, at its core, my point of view is there's no such thing as a benchmark. Your business is unique to itself. Your buyers are unique. What you sell, how you sell, everything is unique. And therefore, you really need to be benchmarking against yourself. Now, I also realize that that is not a conversation that many people will go to the C-suite and have an argument about, because chances are they're going to have to lose in some way. But I think when we kind of peel back those layers, we need to think about what are the metrics that actually make a difference. And so many times in my world, people are asking about benchmarks related to, let's say, click-through rate or cost per click, or all of these kind of fuzzy metrics that really don't get to the core aspect of what moves the needle for a business. And in that respect, I think we need to think about what are some of the benchmarks that we can ascertain around conversion rate from one stage of this life cycle to another, or average deal sizes, or anything else that is kind of in that mentality of moving either account or a lead from one step to the other, whether it's brand aware to brand unaware to aware, or through pipeline and opportunity. And those are the kinds of metrics that when you start to have that conversation, I think you start to appeal and make sense to the C-suite, especially here, of you're not going to get that data anywhere else. You have to get some leading indicators that go into that. But that's where benchmarking against yourself is going to be more powerful at the end of the day to drive decision-making.
It's so true. Just continuous improvement is always great. So in your experience, what are some common pitfalls that companies face when integrating paid media into their marketing strategies?
This really depends on where they're at in their marketing life cycle. I mean, there's the whole startup side of things of, hey, we've never done marketing before, to, oh, we're driving growth and scale through organic, but that scale is starting to kind of flatline. And now we want to add paid into the mix to see what is the extra scalability out that. And there's other things that get wrapped into that then. When you get to growth stage companies or enterprise companies, it's also understanding, you know, where does paid fit into that entire strategy mix? And then also, what does that strategy mix look like today? And what's the transition look like? Specifically, a lot of times we see this transition out of demand gen or performance marketing into ABM. And some of the pitfalls that span across that entire span of scenarios comes down to, let's say, time commitment. And is the brand actually willing to experiment and pilot, or are they just looking for a quick fix? And by that, I mean, I've had numerous conversations where somebody will come in and they'll say, oh, we want to run a paid media pilot. But their deal cycle is 6 months long, but they only want to run it for 1 or 2 months. That doesn't align to actually how you do business, right? It goes back to that benchmarks conversation a little bit. So understanding a time commitment and willingness to actually pilot something is pitfall number one. Pitfall number two are the resources needed to actually make that pilot successful. You can't go to an agency in our case and be like, here you go, I want to do this, this, and this. Great, we can do all of that work for you, but there's also a time commitment and resource commitment on your side of distilling down what you sell, who you sell it to. You know your business better than we ever will. And then also the resources that go into the actual campaign, from content and creative to having a budget that supports the initiatives of what you're trying to achieve. And then the last piece of things, I think, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is measurement. What defines success of this pilot or of this program? And where does that success lie within that marketing journey? If we're talking about ABM, we're not going to measure ABM in a lead gen mentality. No, we're going to have to measure it in a different MQA or account progression model versus something that's a little bit more performance driven or performance heavy that we can get a little bit deeper on around, let's say, leads, MQLs, SQLs, and then through to pipe.
Yeah, I'm hearing a theme come through of like there's not a one size fits all solution for any of these topics that we're talking about. And also when it comes to working with clients directly, understanding that there is commitment involved, both from time, resources, and overall kind of strategic commitment that needs to be involved to really generate success.
Yeah, and by no means am I saying that you're increasing your workload. No, by working with an external expert or an agency, like there should be a handoff here of bandwidth and capacity. Like that's a reason that you go to an agency, is you are wearing multiple hats, your team is wearing multiple hats, you're stretched thin, and you're seeking outside expertise because you don't feel like you can take your results to the next level by yourselves. So there is that aspect of handoff. But yeah, the understanding that there are so many other variables that get wrapped into that, I think does fall short on a lot of people out there, because they're looking for the quick fixes and the quick wins when there's short-term gains, but you also have to keep in mind long-term results too.
Yeah. I mean, we all operate in such a fast-paced environment these days. So I think it's super important to remember that. So something that we hear often, and I'm sure you hear this as well, is how do you evaluate individual channels? Like LinkedIn is a good example. So getting a little bit more into the measurement framework here, do you talk about incrementality? Do you think about something else? I'm curious.
At its core, it's understanding what opportunity does the channel provide. In my mind, it's kind of going into this framework that I like to call audience media fit. And it's understanding who's the ICP and the buyers that we're trying to attract and engage with versus where do they hang out? Is it a channel that they're actually going to hang out on and use frequently enough to justify running ads on in our case? And then combined with that, what is the content and the creative and the messaging needed to support that? So when we think about it through that lens, if there's a fit, then there's a channel opportunity. If there's not a fit, let's say, we're talking about controllers or even CFOs and a very financial heavy crowd, chances are they're not using LinkedIn enough on a daily basis to justify it. And if they are, or if we are able to target them there effectively, then we need to think about behaviorally, how can we prompt them to use the platform? Because they're not going to log in every day or every week to justify a significant spend. It dictates where and how we're going to use the platform at the end of the day. And then when we think about measurement that gets associated with that, it comes into play of where is this channel fitting in to the existing marketing strategy? Is it a nurture tactic? Is it a demand gen or awareness and engagement tactic and channel? Or is it moving somebody through because of it's a retargeting mechanism? Great example here would be, let's say comparing LinkedIn and Meta. LinkedIn has great behavioral and first-party data targeting because it's the B2B platform. However, if we're to run retargeting through LinkedIn, it can get super expensive. So we can offset that if we think about how can we use, let's say, Facebook and Instagram as a paid social retargeting play. We would never use that to generate demand because the targeting is so poor there outside of, let's say, contact lists or account lists. But if we use it as retargeting, we're going to get a cheaper CPM and a cheaper cost per engagement than we would on LinkedIn. Great example of using two channels combined in a strategy. And when we talk about how we measure that, I believe incrementality is to an extent a way that we can measure it, but it only works if you're actually measuring success on a per platform basis, which isn't how people buy, right? People go in and out of the buyer's journey. They're using multiple sources, whether it's online, they're going to ChatGPT and other LLMs. They're talking to their peers. And The reality is incrementality really works if you can separate that out from a control versus a treatment group. And by that, I mean, let's say in an ABM model, just for the sake of this example, we have 50% of our accounts being targeted within paid media and another 50% that are not, right? We have a control group and then we have a treatment group. And when it goes back to measuring success, we can say, oh, this treatment group is being, is seeing X amount more engagement. They're seeing X more progression in pipeline or accounts progression versus the control group, which hasn't been treated at all with an ad. And therefore it can start to justify not just the program, but where we spend our dollars. I think it's really hard to do that at a platform level though, unless again, you're super, super focused on, let's say like product demos and that's all you're promoting. But again, that's got a short life cycle and shelf life overall from a marketing strategy.
Yeah, no, that is challenging. And we think about incrementality in your control groups all the time. One thing that could help is AI. And we're more than maybe halfway through this conversation and we haven't talked about AI. So just thinking about that in general, what do you see as the role of AI in enhancing the work that you do or complicating it? Are there any tools or tactics that you've seen that have worked? What's your take on all that?
I think there's two ways to split that out. There is the workflow side of things, and then there's the marketing side of things. So let's hit the marketing side first. And the fact that no brand should ignore the fact that their buyers are using LLMs, whether it's ChatGPT, Perplexity, or any of the other ones out there to get a sense of who is the ideal fit for their problems. And understanding that and knowing that directly indicates and informs the marketing strategy from what you would consider old school, like reputation management and brand ownership, right? What credibility do you have out there? Because those are the sources that LLMs are pulling in to create those recommendations, to create those curated lists. Everything from thought leadership to, in our world as an agency, Clutch is a great kind of aggregator of agency reviews, but think about G2, Capterra, all those things, as well as just the clarity around what you do and what you offer and who you offer it for. I think that's the big thing that brands need to keep in mind, because as more buyers start to use those AI tools, whether it's a direct tool or Google's AI overview that it is using in every single search result now, it is going to proliferate to the point of expectations of a buyer and also preemptively a buyer needing to use those mechanisms to figure out who's the ideal fit, or here's the list of curated companies that can solve my problem. Now, on the workflow side of things, I don't know if it necessarily overcomplicates it. I think it can enhance it, but I also think it comes back to setting expectations on, in our case, we'll say time to deliver, and balancing that against quality of output. With the proliferation of all these tools, there is an expectation that work can be done faster. And that's not a bad expectation. However, it's also what you put into it that you get out of it. So just using AI tools for the sake of getting things done faster doesn't necessarily translate into higher quality. In fact, it probably reduces the quality because everybody is actually using the same information or using the same base level prompts to create noise that exceeds everything else that's in the market today. So it's how you use them in the balancing act, and then making sure that those tools provide a qualified output that a human then can finesse and ensure that it actually creates clarity and creates not noise, but differentiation within the market. So I think it enhances workflow, but there's still that human element that has to take it to the next step.
Yeah, great point. I mean, did you have those trade-offs for sure on the workflow side? And then a great point about that kind of reputation management and then getting your point of view out in a clear way so the LLMs can appropriately serve your content or point of view on your content to prospective buyers. I think that's great. How would you say that marketers can balance the need for data-driven decisions with the agility that's required in today's fast-paced environment?
I have said this for many years, that statistical significance is a pipe dream. There is no such thing in marketing. It just doesn't exist. And the only time it does exist is when you have a really crappy control or a really crappy variant. And you know that going into it. And when it becomes 95% confidence, you're actually not surprised by that because of how low the bar was set by either of those. I think in the case of marketing today, especially in the B2B world, when you have sales cycles that can be 3, 6, 12, 24 months long, you cannot wait for statistical significance, but you need to use the data that you have available to directionally drive you to act on that. And at the end of the day, this is where LLMs and AI will never actually help somebody, is the gut feel that marketing needs to be successful. Yes, an LLM or an AI tool can ingest the data, it can provide insights, it can provide some directional thoughts, but at the end of the day, the human itself has to let their gut and their heart and their brain drive the decision making, because data alone is faulty with so many variables and variants that you can get sucked into it very quickly, and you're going to get left behind real quickly as a result of that.
I totally agree on the human element. And I think you touched on something key here, which I want to dig into a little bit deeper, which is the alignment between marketing and sales and that handover. So what strategies do you recommend for aligning sales and marketing teams to ensure, that cohesive handover, messaging, alignment of objectives, all of that, to make sure that's functioning?
Talk to each other. That's step number one.
Talk
Talk to each other more than once a quarter. Quick vent session real quick. Like, it is baffling to me how many times that we will hop on a client call with marketing and sales, and the only reason they're talking to each other is because we scheduled a meeting that combines both of them. Like, it is so surprising to me that they do not interact with each other more often. And it's like the first time they're talking to each other is because of us. But going back to the core question you asked, Stephany, like, it is really understanding what does success look like for either of those parties, because there are differentiations and both have their own responsibilities. But if you can come together, and I don't want to kind of be the preachy one of like, oh, everybody should be focused on revenue. Like, yeah, no duh. Like, yeah, that's how a business survives. But sales is going to have their own interpretation of what revenue means and how they're going to achieve it, especially when you bake in commissions and salaries and things like that. And marketing is going to have a different view of things. You're going to have MQLs, you could have SQLs, you could have MQAs and account progression, all those things. It's finding the commonalities there, I think, is so important. And what we do working with our clients is we do a pretty lengthy but very agile framework of onboarding clients, where we understand and get into the weeds of like who the ICP is, who the buyers are, what they care about, things like that. But then we do a whole stakeholder interview set that ranges from marketing and sales to product, customer success, and leadership, and asking questions that start to frame things in a different mindset than just getting like an NPS survey or like, some degree of, 1 through 5 rate this. No, we're trying to get the context and the conversations out of it so that we can create those through lines and understand if sales is hearing this on conversations and sales calls, especially like if it's common objections that might come up, well, then what are we doing on the marketing side to address those proactively rather than just waiting for it to become an issue in the sales process? Or what are the features that somebody is clamoring onto on the product side of things, or a feature that people have requested 99% of the time but hasn't gotten released yet, or maybe it is finally coming into release, and how do we bring that into market? It's understanding all of those differing viewpoints and finding the through lines in between them and aligning them with what the customers actually care about as that other final piece of that stakeholder interview set. So it's creating a lot of conversations and looking for the context, not just the quantitative outputs of those conversations.
That one's great. I mean, you hear so often sales teams trying to pull more data from the marketing teams and give me more signals, give me more leads. But you're right. Like, you need more information coming from the sales team on what are the objections we're hearing, where are we getting stuck in the sales process, get that content to the marketing team so they can prime those prospects during the sales process. So I love that. It's a great point.
Well, Dan, it also goes back to how you sell and how big your sales team is. Because if you have an enterprise size sales team, that directly influences how you go to market. You can do more content leads. You can do more kind of full funnel content and lead generation activities because you have a team that you need to feed. You got to feed the beast versus a 1, 2, or 3 person sales team. Look, they don't have the time to be messing around with higher in the funnel leads or anything like that. Like, you do need to focus on driving qualified contacts and qualified accounts that are going to do a demo, that are going to do a free trial, because they only have the time to do that. And if you start driving them junk, chances are they're going to start to pipe up and cause more conflict internally than what you want to happen. And ultimately, no one wins in that situation.
Yep. Great point. So maybe one last question for marketers that are feeling overwhelmed by all these tools out there and all the different platforms. What advice do you recommend to build an effective B2B measurement strategy?
Similar to what I said about statistical significance being a pipe dream, there is no single source of truth. And everybody that is in the B2B game needs to just realize that. You know, you're going to have different platforms. You're going to have everything from, let's say, 6 Sense demand base, which are going to take credit for so many different things, versus, you know, other tools that are going to ingest data, but only give part of the data that you're looking to achieve. And really, I think it comes down to understanding that statement, and also coming to the conclusion that you're going to need to piece together data sets and insights across platforms, across tool sets, and going back to what I was saying before, making your own decisions based on that data that is presented to you and the suggestive directional data that you interpret out of it. Because there is no bulletproof view of things. There's things that are always going to be scattered because of how the data is ingested. There is no foolproof platform out there that gives you, 100% attribution or viewability into whatever's working and whatever's not. It just doesn't exist.
And that's why we're here at Octane 11. We're working on delivering that as best we can, connecting the dots wherever possible across platforms, across data sets, whether it's paid, owned, and earned, bringing everything to an account, tying it to a sales CRM, making it standardized across companies in the industry so you can get some wisdom of the crowd. But you're right, it is a big challenge, and it's getting to be more and more challenging because the fragmentation of media, just like I said at the top of the conversation, how many different tools that marketers are using. And by the way, it's never going to end, because your job as a marketer is to break through the noise. So whatever you are using last quarter, last month, last year is not going to work next quarter, next month, next year. So you need to be constantly changing. And just by definition, that means lots of different tools that are constantly changing. So that's really challenging. So I would say that our job at Octane 11 is to try to synthesize that as much as possible, to put all that data into the hands of marketers, their agency partners, so they can do as good a job as possible.
Yep. Yeah. And at Dragon360, to your point, it's taking that data and then letting it help drive that directional decision-making around what messaging is resonating, what channels and what audiences are actually moving the needle, and how do you scale that, or how do you test out different avenues to reaching either that same audience or a different audience that is of similar mindset or wrapped into a different product buyer set. So yeah, I mean, it is working hand in hand and being creative, breaking through the noise, and ultimately measuring the outcomes to the best of our ability.
Well, let's work on that one together.
There you go.
That's all the time we've got. That went very fast. I think we were a little more than 11 minutes, but we covered a lot of great ground. And some of the things that we talked about benchmarking against yourself, being willing to experiment, particularly when it comes to paid, matching your time commitment of not just of your sales cycle to the marketing plan, but also like having some kind of commitment to do some work on getting it all right. Definitely leveraging your agency partner, matching your metrics to your goals, matching the media to the goals. So you talked about the example of like, do some targeting on LinkedIn, but when it comes time to retargeting, maybe look at lower cost channels. The importance of incrementality for testing impact and making sure you have a good control group. We talked about AI. We talked about AI for marketing, your kind of reputation management, feeding data into the LLMs so they have your point of view, whether it's Clutch or for agencies, but G2, Capterra, but AI for workflow, making sure you're clear on that time to deliver versus quality. Like obviously you always want to make sure you're delivering great quality. There are no shortcuts. AI can help. This idea of waiting for statistical significance, you may never get statistical significance So you have to be decisive. And that's another thing where you can work with an agency partner that has the experience. The importance of communication across teams. I loved your example of it's not just about what can the marketing team get to the sales team, but getting the sales team to get that content to the marketing team around overcoming objectives. And then this great last conversation we had about the single source of truth, connecting different platforms, how hard it is to do that, and maybe getting harder. Maybe it's never solved, but companies like Octane 11, partners like Dragon360 trying to help connect those dots and make sense of it. That's the best thing you can do as a marketer. So with that, it's great stuff. I really appreciate your time. We've got an amazing lineup of B2B marketing experts on deck. We're going to go even deeper into the ABM reporting stack. So check out more episodes at octane11.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks for listening.
Thank you.